Hello and a very warm welcome to the program, People, Politics and Power. I am Imonia Marere. As Nigeria marches steadily towards the 2027 general elections, the nation's political landscape is expectedly stirring with realignments, strategic alliances, and renewed aspirations for power. At the heart of these developments is the emergence of a broad opposition coalition that appears ambitious in its scope and its objectives, rallying under the platform of the African Democratic Congress, ADC. Anchored by prominent figures and influential political actors, this coalition has sparked both hope and skepticism in equal measure. Is this a genuine movement to reset Nigeria's democratic trajectory, or merely another elite-driven power arrangement? Can a diverse and ambitious group with competing presidential interests unite long enough to challenge the entrenched dominance of the ruling party? And with legal tussles, factional pushbacks, and questions over grassroots penetration, is the ADC-led coalition structurally and ideologically prepared to offer Nigerians a real alternative? Now, we have convened a panel of political thinkers and public affairs analysts to interrogate these questions. We will examine the strengths, the fractures, the vision, and the viability, as well as the antecedents and precedents, if any, of this coalition and its promoters. What will it take to move from political symbolism to real electoral impact? And is Nigeria's political future truly up for grabs? These and many more questions we shall seek to find answers to. Welcome to the conversation. We'll take a short break, and when we return, we'll get to meet our guest analysts who'll be with us in the studio here and will also be joining us from other parts of the country.
The Nigeria of our dream, the Nigeria we need, is the united, indissoluble, and cohesive Nigeria which guarantees equity, fairness, justice, and prosperity for its citizens. That is our focus on people, politics, and power. It is fresh, insightful, impactful. It's a must-watch. People, politics, and power on AIT. The Nigeria of our dream, the Nigeria we need, is the united, indissoluble, and cohesive Nigeria which guarantees equity, fairness, justice, and prosperity for its citizens. That is our focus on people, politics, and power. It is fresh, insightful, impactful. It's a must-watch. People, politics, and power on AIT.
Thank you so much for staying with us. Let's get to meet our guest analysts. First, let's go to Lagos, where we'll meet Professor Adc-Led, a renowned political scientist and a teacher and researcher. Professor Adc-Led, thank you so much for finding time to join us. Prof, I hope you can hear us.
Good afternoon, morning. Nice to be with you again.
Great, thank you so much.
Yes, I can hear you quite well. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you, Prof. We're also joined by another professor, Professor B.N. Makodi, who is a professor of political science at the Nnamdi Azikiwe University in Awka, and he's also the vice president of Political Science Association of Nigeria. Professor Makodi, thank you so much for joining us. Professor Makodi, can you hear us? You will need to unmute so that we can hear you here in the studio, Professor. Well, I'm sure we'll be able to resolve that very shortly. But right here in the studio, we have joining us a civil society activist and a public intellectual, Tunde Aremu. Thank you so much for joining us. Right. So, Professor Adc-Led, let's begin this way. First, what is your disposition, or indeed how did you react to the emergence of the ADC as a coalition of opposition political parties?
I think it's good for democracy because I think as many voices as are coming out to contest for various positions in 2027, the better it is for the system. But I think against that must be placed the fact that the ruling power, the ruling party at both federal and state government levels, because they have state and federal elections, the ruling parties at both levels will also do their best to retain power, which is their legitimate right to do. But my concern, as things unfold, is that the political space may get so heated and controversial, and because of that, you may not have a level playing field to conduct the elections, particularly in terms of the reaction of ruling parties at the federal and state level. And what do I mean by that? One is that we have a long history in this country of ruling parties at the federal and state level abusing state power for partisan electoral political advantage. That is a very serious concern for me because it diminishes the level playing ground that it should have. But the other aspect of it, which is also worrisome to me, is that if you look at the pattern of all these very, very various coalition arrangements, it is anchored on the North-South divide in the country. And in recent months, this has even become couched in hate speech, So I think as we did in 2023, we will also have a lot of hate speech going forward in this electoral cycle. And I think it's unfortunate because nowhere does this constitution provide for rotational presidency or rotational governorship at the state level. What the federal character provides for is the reflection that not one ethnic group or combination of ethnic groups will capture state bureaucracy, will capture federal bureaucracy, federal appointments. But the constitution is so clear in leaving the office of governor and the office of president open, not zoned. I mean, in fact, in 1999, 1993 or 94, thereabouts, the National Conference rejected the whole idea of rotational presidency. Because what the Constitution wants is that the best person, regardless of whether you are from the North or from the South, emerges as the president. So the Constitution does not provide for that, even though it talks of federal character in terms of appointments to certain political positions, elected public of certain political appointments in the country. So I think, so it is unfortunate, therefore, and the Constitution in its wisdom also provides to ensure that the president or governor is not just dependent on one section of the state government or one section of the federal government, makes for the spread factor, so that the person is acceptable to all Nigerians. But what we are seeing now, particularly in the mass media, in the social media, is this North versus South, North versus South. And I think it's unfortunate. And the third point I want to make, and I think the press has a very, very important role to play in this, and our elders. Politicians are using the media, particularly the print, the TV, the electronic media, to preach hate in this country. They use the church, they use the mosque, they use all kinds of to just preach hate. And I think the press is enabling them. It's enabling them, and they are hitting up the system. Intemperate language that only goes up to hit up the political system. Those are the three things that I worry about as we move about. I'm not worried about alliances. Alliances can be formed and let them contest elections. If they win, good. If they don't win, good. But for God's sake, one, don't abuse the power of incumbents in a blatant way for partisan electoral political advantage. Don't divide the country along north-south, because the Constitution does not provide for that in terms of the presidency or the governorship election. And three, please let us look at our language and how we, because most of those people I see on television, they are not statesmen. They are rabble-rousers. They are thugs. The way they talk is unfortunate. And it's also unfortunate that our elders are keeping quiet, and our mosque, they are also being used as part of this process of putting fire on the house. So I don't know if
Okay,
my point is clear.
Prof, yes. I'm sure that we will be unraveling some of those issues that we have put on the table for now. But Mr. Aremu, who is right here, I'd like to begin by asking you, do we have any historical antecedents or precedents of this kind of coalition in Nigeria and indeed anywhere else in Africa?
Well, in Nigeria, it's actually not a new phenomenon. I mean, as far back as the First Republic, we had what we call the United Progressive Grand Alliance, OPGA, which was formed then by the Action Group and the NCNC. And even on the other side then, even for the party in power then, Northern People's Congress,
NPC, yes.
And with Akintola's led National Democratic Party, actually formed what they call then National Alliance. So it's not something new. And in the Second Republic, we also witnessed it, where we had the UPN, MPP, and a faction of the PRP then, also coming together to form what they call PPA, Progressive Parties Alliance. And so it's not a new phenomenon. And looking globally too, the issue of alliance within political parties is not something new and peculiar to us. I keep reminding people, I was discussing with some people recently, and I said when this issue came up that, look, when David Cameron was coming to power in the UK, it was because of an alliance between Liberal Democrats and the Conservative Party, which he belonged to. I think that was what brought David Cameron in. And it's not only in Nigeria. You go to Germany, you also find out that it has always been a coalition or another. And not to even mention Italy, where it's a continuous emergence of coalition in government. But where we are coming, I think the concern here is this. In the First Republic, it was very clear that there was ideological issues in terms of the formation of the alliance then. In the Second Republic, you could also find, yes, there are some differences between UPN, MPP, PRP, but you could also almost say, okay, there are some similarities to some extent between the faction of the PRP that was part of the PPA and the UPN. But unfortunately, what we have now that is emerging now is actually a cause for concern. Maybe, as Prof said, it's a welcome idea that we are opening up the space, but then there's also a challenge. The alliance that is emerging is also not new, even in this dispensation. Don't let us also forget that even the emergence of APC itself is also based on an alliance, because ACN and some faction of the AMPP, and eventually the party that the former President Buhari belonged to, also came together to form that coalition, and then from that coalition emerged what you have as APC now. So it's not a new phenomenon. But then the issue is, what do they represent, the new one? And if you also watch on TV yesterday, one of the major elements, one of the drivers of this new coalition that has emerged, said that this is not an alliance between political parties. It's an alliance of individuals. And what do they represent? Where have they been before? These are the same sort of people who are being governed. What have been their contribution to the system? What do they represent? Can you also pick out, in terms of ideas, in terms of ideology, in terms of worldview, in terms of economic principle of governance, what do they actually believe in? These are also some of the issues that should start coming up.
Well, these are very germane and critical questions that you have raised. And that's where I'm going to bring in Professor Makodi now. I hope that we have been able to resolve his audio issues. Professor Makodi, are you with us now? Hello,
yes,
Prof?
I am.
Great. Now, so these are some of the
I
questions.
can hear you loud and clear.
Great. It's good to have you
Can
now.
you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you, Prof. I can hear you. Great. So now the questions have been asked. In terms of coalitions and alliances in Nigeria, it's not new. But what is different about this one is that it is a coalition or alliances of individual politicians, unlike in the previous ones where political parties or political associations came together.
Thank you very much.
Yes. Go ahead. Go ahead, Prof.
Yes, I can hear you. My take on it is that the present coalition or coming together is fairly different from what we have had. Like in the past, coming together, we had parties coming together as political parties and then individuals who are involved in the parties. But in the present effort, what I can observe is that it's a coalition of individuals from different political parties. And that also raises my first doubt, even though I welcome the idea of coalition coming together, because in political party activity, you must always have people coming together, agreeing and disagreeing. But my major worry is that the first thing ought to have been a kind of coming together of these individuals to chart a common ground of ideas, of central ideas upon which the coalition can be formed. So at present, I'm at difficulty trying to identify what is the driving force they have identified as the rallying point for the group. For example, I know some of them have in the past talked about 6-year tenure. I know they have also sometimes talked about whether we should change to prime ministerial system instead of presidential system. Are this, for example, the central idea behind what they are talking about that has guided the coming together of the coalition? So beside this, so they need to have agreed or come together to agenda a program or major core issues that will identify the coalition, besides just common name of ADC. So that is my point. Then the next one is that I agree that there's need to have a coalition that is strong, that will, because opposition is important in political activity. We need strong opposition. The present political parties that come as opposition are not doing so well. They are fragmented, as it were. Even though in the last elections, you could also see that their performance were far below that of APC. And so there is need for elements or the political parties that are in opposition to come together to give a good contest in 2027 for APC. Thank you.
Okay, Prof, just let me extend that to ask, and that's what Tunde has put on the table. These individuals that have come together to coalesce into an opposition ADC, most of them, if not all of them, have been in the corridors of power for as long as we can remember. In fact, since 1999, many of the promoters of this coalition have either been in power or supported those who have been in power. And the question is being asked, what is new? What new things are they bringing on board? What is different from what they did in the past that they think they can upstage the current people who are in power?
That goes back to the issue of programs.
Go ahead, Prof. All right. So let me hope that we're able to get back Professor as soon as possible. Professor Makodi, Professor of Political Science at the Nnamdi Azikiwe University in Awka, Anambra State, Southeast Nigeria. Let's get back to Professor Adeleji Nodo, and I'm going to ask you that same question about the individuality of the members of this coalition. They have not carried their political parties along. Indeed, some of the political parties are threatening to disown them or indeed expel them from their political parties if they do not either resign or clearly state where they belong. And the big question is, these are the same folks, the same persons who have either held political offices at state or at federal levels at one time or the other since 1999. So what is new? What are they bringing on board? Or what did they intend to bring on board?
Thank you, Imuni. I think we need to get certain things clear. Every Nigerian who meets the basic requirements for public elective office can join any party office of our own choice. I think that is clear. So it is irrelevant whether they've held office before or they've not held office before, and they are going to, you cannot prevent them from contesting. They have that right. Those that will be problematic are those like governors or members of the House of Assembly at the state level and the National Assembly at the federal level who were elected on the platform of particular political parties. The Constitution provides what they need to do if they can resign their position, if they are to cross over to another party. And I think the onus will be on those ones when it comes, but those who are not either governors or who are not members of the National Assembly or members of the House of Assembly or governor can join any party, can join any coalition. But of course, the important point, and this is my second point, is that we should not look at political parties in Nigeria from the prism of political parties in other environments. Our Constitution makes it clear what you need to do to be a political party and what you need to do to enroll members as people as members of your political parties. And that is precisely why, because they are afraid that they may not meet the basic requirements to form new parties ahead of 2027, some of them are moving to other political parties, which is completely their constitutional right. They can join any party they want, so long as they meet the requirements for membership as stipulated in the party constitution and so on and so forth. So I think we need to get that clear. The third point, the question of ideology, I think is a smokescreen. The Constitution already makes it clear that any association that wants to register as a political party must subscribe to Chapter 2 of our Constitution. That's the ideological thing that is. And Chapter 2 states out what that requires in terms of, the programs of a political party. Some of us are unhappy that the political parties have completely forgotten Chapter 2. But then that is for the regulatory body to take care of. But the point is that before you are registered as a political party, you must subscribe to Chapter 2 of the Constitution. That is required. So the question, but what is worrisome is that, yes, we've had coalitions in the past, but are we learning the right experience? You see, after the 59 federal elections, party realignment started after those elections. And you then have the party at the federal level that went all out to take advantage of a split within a political party to decapitate that party, the Action Group. They went out, they used the power of incumbency to decapitate the Action Group and to cause trouble in the Western region. That was the first serious crack towards 1966 in terms of what happened. Because they then declared a state of emergency in that state and made sure that an unpopular government came back using federal power of incumbency. And the 1965 elections in the Western region set the whole country on fire, not just the Western, set the country on fire and led to what happened in January. You know, so, and some of us are worried. We are worried not because there are alliances, but because there is a deliberate effort to use the power of incumbency to decapitate the opposition. By the same way that the governing party did in between 1959 and 1963, to use the power of incumbency to of a split within an opposition party. And we can see that happening in our eyes. So the question of alliances that is what is relevant is that they have the right to form alliances, and the parties have the right and they can switch party except to the extent to which they are not violating the constitution in terms of whether you're elected on a party platform. Then you need to resign, you know. And then, but the problem we've had, and that is why I'm saying is that this problem is there because the political parties, regardless of whether it is governing party or not governing party, have weakened the guardrails of democracy in this country. Those guardrails are weak, and they cannot prevent the sort of thing that is happening. They are not strong enough to prevent what is happening now. Use security. Most governments have been doing that. So the guardrails of democracy are weak. And that is political parties. We've always had a single party dominant system at the state level. It's at the federal level that is competitive. Under the First Republic, until 1962, the Action Group from 51 to 62 was the ruling government in the Western region, and it was using state power to retain itself in office. In the Eastern region, the NCNC was in power from 51 to the end of the First Republic. Again, using state power to win elections at the local level. In the Northern region, the same thing happened. So we've always had single dominant party, but the problem is at the center, where there is shared rule, and where the party at the center is trying to use the power of incumbency to cause rift within the political party and to cause problem for them because they just want to win power at the federal level. That is the major threat to our democracy now. And that is why it's important for people to resist this. And the last point that one needs to make here, that these institutions are being used. And that is why people are also worried that with the vacancies in the INEC in the next few months, then it is clear that party members are going to be elected to be appointed as INEC commissioners. And that is why we should be worried. So don't necessarily worry about alliances and all they've held office before. Who has not held office before? Who has not moved from one party to the other before? APC said it's a coalition of former of CPC, ACN, and who have come together to ring power. But under Jonathan, the government did not use that power of incumbency to weaken the opposition the way we are seeing now. And that is why it gives us that we should look back to 59, 66, when you see a process, and even the Electoral Commission itself was used at that time to weaken the opposition party.
All right.
So that is the major cause. All this talk about their background, their track record, the way this, the way that, all of them are the same. You know, but the important point is that let there be free, let there be a fair playing ground among all of them. That is what should be of concern to us.
Thank you so much, Prof. Let me get back here to Tunde in the studio. You raised these questions. I'm sure that you have been thinking about them too. The fact that this coalition is made up of individuals who have not carried their political parties along, as opposed to what we had in the past, and the fact that there have been serious opposition from within the parties of these individuals moving away to ADC, and in fact some of them claiming, no, I'm still a member of my original political party. I'm only going into this alliance or into this coalition for whatever purpose. And we already see the possible power tussle that will break out in that coalition or that alliance as we go ahead, as we move on towards 2027. Is this going to pose a problem?
Well, it's going to pose a problem. And how is it going to pose a problem? With all respect to Prof, I agree with him that it's the right of the individuals to belong to any platform, any formation they belong to. And I also agree with him that to some extent, the electoral law, the constitution, or the extant law actually permit people to move into any platform that they belong to. But then, for me, it's not about these individuals. It is about the country and what it means for the average Nigerian out there. I think that is probably the issue of importance, the thing of concern for some of us. Now, let's break it down. First of all, in terms of the political parties, the alliances, and in terms of the ruling party itself, as I've said earlier on, the ruling party itself emerged out of an alliance. And for me, what has that alliance transformed to for the mass of the people, for the majority of Nigerians? In the past 2 years, interestingly, a survey also came out recently that also said that the people have not felt the effect of governance, to the extent that people have also become very cynical, not just about government, but even the ruling party itself. So that is undeniable. But then, in this instance, what Nigerians are looking for is an alternative that actually projects towards them something that is going to have positive impact on their lives, that is going to take the mass of the people out of poverty. And that is where some of us are beginning to assess this new coalition. What does it mean? Unfortunately, it does not portend anything for us. It does not mean anything positive for a person like me. Because then, in terms of alternative, what does it stand for? The alliance that is emerging now, I'm also very careful about calling it ADC. Yeah, they've moved into a political party. But they are also claiming now that they are not forming a new party or hijacking a party, because it's also a lot of confusion around even their identity now. Because if you are not going in as a coalition of parties, you are going in as a coalition of individuals, you have every right to join a new party. But when a presidential candidate of a political party in the last election is coming out and saying that he's not abandoning his party, but he's also joining this coalition, I mean, there's some level of deception, and it also comes to what, for some of us, there is no difference. I'm beginning to look at APC, I'm beginning to look at ADC, I'm beginning to look at whatever contraption they are coming out with. I can't see any difference. Because unfortunately, the APC as it is now, in reality, forget the issue of someone at the center controlling things. You can also not say that you have a unified party, a party that has cohesion. So for me, it's also about the issue of ideas, the ideology. I think it's also very important. I also agree that the Constitution, particularly Chapter 2 of the Constitution, is very clear about the expectations of political parties, what they should represent, what they should promise, what they should offer to the people of Nigeria. But the issue is that APC, APD, PDP, Labour, as it is now, whichever one of them, which one of them is actually giving Nigeria anything that is actually recommended or prescribed in that part of the Constitution. That's one. The second one for me too is also a serious issue of concern about the electoral umpire itself. Because what we have had, for me, there has always been this contentious issue about who they work for. At some point, it was accusation that they were tools in the hand of PDP when PDP was in government. There have been accusations in the last election that there were tools in the hand of APC. But for me, it's not that they be tools in the hand of any political party, but that they have decided to constitute themselves to a political platform against the mass of the people of Nigeria. Because why am I also saying so? We are the alternative. The INEC as it is now has not allowed a credible, truly mass-oriented party and people-owned party to emerge. The series of, first of all, the set of the refusal to register parties towards the 2003 election. We also know the stress that a lot of people went through there that led to the emergence of NCP and co. before the parties, some of the parties were registered. And then the ace with which the INEC also went in the past 10 years or thereabouts, the registering parties, some of the parties that have not had the opportunity of even contesting major elections were deregistered almost immediately.
Is that not provided for in the Electoral Act? Because is INEC not respecting the letters and spirit of the Electoral Act?
Act as it is now, we should also not forget that the Electoral Act as it is now is something that evolved out of the advocacy, out of the request of the INEC itself. Don't let us also forget that. The INEC play substantial role in advocating for the Electoral Act as it is. Yes, there were some issues, there were some tendentious issues even at the National Assembly around the issue of the Electoral Act. But the basic thing is that Nigeria, with a population of over 200,000, 200 million, cannot have half of the political parties that UK has. Because I keep explaining to people that, look, though you hear of Conservative Party, Labour Party majorly, and once in a while some others, maybe 2 or 3 other political parties, but that in the UK, you have nothing less than 393 registered political parties. And population of UK as of now is 68 million.
And those political parties, so many of them are only interested in local elections.
The same thing in Canada.
Exactly, they are interested in local elections, and they do hold seats at those local, at the local level. But there are many of the parties that have been registered in Nigeria that have contested elections and could not win even councillorship elections at the local level. So how do they become national parties? Because the constitution is quite clear that these parties must be national in outlook. The constitution does not make provision for regional or even state or local government political parties.
I think that's also the flaw in the law, and that's where I also said we also put a lot of things at the doorstep of INEC. Because don't also forget that, look, there were calls by many Nigerians, a lot of groups, a lot of associations, political platforms, requesting that, look, political parties do not necessarily have to be national parties. That, look, if I'm from Ibadan, and all I'm interested in is transforming the lives of the people of Ibadan, I can join like-minded and form a political party that will just seek the purpose of being in power in Ibadan and transforming the lives of people in Ibadan. But unfortunately, the electoral empire itself had been insisting that political parties in Nigeria must be national parties. But unfortunately, you also ask yourself, where are these coming from? Is it from studies conducted? The INEC has electoral institutes, as research centers. And we've not been informed that why this is advantageous for the country. Why it is that, look, if I live in Karan Amuda, why I must necessarily be interested in which party wins an election in Ebonyi. These are some of the critical issues that are also coming up, that unfortunately, until we have an electoral umpire that is truly an umpire in the electoral process, we may still have challenges with making progress.
Let's see if we can return to Professor Makodi, who's in Oka. Is he with us now?
Yes, I am.
Oh, great, great. Good to have you back, Prof. I'm sure you've been listening very attentively to both Professor Jinodu and Mr. Aremu here. And I wonder what you have to chip in all of this.
Yeah, the first thing is to align with my senior colleague, Professor Jinedu, the formation of political parties or individuals who contest election must not necessarily come from the moon. We can always, people who have been in party or in power before can always be in power, can always contest again. They may even have new ideas based on the previous experience they have had. So we cannot discount such persons because they have been in power before. So, and the Constitution allows persons to always contest again as often as they are willing to contest elections. The next one I think is also important is the role of democratic institutions, the role of INEC, the role of the judiciary in conducting free and fair elections and making sure that the state things run very well in Nigeria. And then the issue of those in power trying to use or abuse state power to make sure that things work in their favor. The issue where you now have many people moving over to the parties in power, whether they are encouraged to do so or they are doing so on their own. But the fact is that some opposition parties are being decimated. It's not healthy for the democracy in Nigeria. Well, I think that opposition needs to organize themselves. It is important. I align myself with the fact that the coalition need to organize themselves in order to be able to play active role in the project we call Nigeria. And in doing that, they need to generate enough ideas upon which they can work, upon which they can also attract voters, upon which they can sell, upon which they can operate. Because the country Nigeria needs to be rescued, needs to have a direction, needs to be encouraged to grow, to blossom like other countries of the world. Thank you.
Prof, just before you go, following up from that, you talk about in Nigeria having a direction. Nigeria can only have a direction if you have political parties that have credible direction and credible programs for the people of Nigeria. And the question that is being asked, or the concern that is being raised at the moment, is the fact that these individuals who are coming into a coalition or into an alliance are Nigerian politicians who probably do not have ideological convictions or even principles on which they stand. And so it's very easy for them to jump from one political party to another, jump from one alliance or coalition to another one, all in the hope of grabbing power. Is that how these politicians hope to build a better Nigeria?
Well, the problem is with us, because even those in power, even the political party in power, it may be difficult to identify their own ideology. Part of what the problem we have on hand is that most political parties, even when they have a manifesto, do not live by their manifesto. Otherwise, the manifesto ought to have been the guiding principle based upon which the party in power acts. And then there's also the provision in the Constitution, which also acts in the formation of political parties. So the issue is that we cannot relax. We cannot say we will not forge ahead because they do not have one principle. But if they're able to come together and identify key issues that they will abide with, they will pursue, then it's better for the country.
So do you see this coalition being a viable one moving forward?
I think it's a viable one if they're able to do what I have always hammered. The first thing they ought to do, they need to itemize key issues that they stand for. For example, where do they stand? For example, I'm talking about an example. On the 6-year tenure they're talking about, instead of 4-year, just single tenure of 6 years. For example, where do they stand on South-North division? What is their take? What do they stand? Do we have prime minister and president, or do we go ahead with the presidential system of government? These are some of the issues. In terms of the economy, what kind of economy do they look forward to? Do they favor private ownership of means of production, or do they favor that more? Where do they stand on issue of privatization of energy? The key issues, they need to agree on these things. That's what political parties are all about. But so long as they continue to operate as individuals, they will continue to have problems.
Thank you so much, Prof. Let me turn to Professor Adc-Led now. Prof, the viability of this new coalition, do you think that is something that could endure towards the 2027 election and beyond?
Well, it's difficult to say because we don't know tomorrow. And as they say, 24 hours is a long time in politics. But one thing I do know is that Nigerians have a vital role to play in standing up to the abuse of political power by parties in power, regardless of which party is in power. It's something that they always, all of them do. And we have allowed them to do it for too long. So between now and 2027, I don't see, how much effort we can make in terms of, turning a new leaf in our political culture, But I think people should keep on talking. People should keep on saying this should not be done. And I can see in the next few years or so that a movement has started, which in the next few years may flower into something substantial. So we need to have short-term viewpoint of what is happening against a medium term. Between now and 2027 is virtually too late. We already have a fait accompli. We have a choice between this group of politicians. All of them have disappointed us in the past. And they are the ones contesting now. So we are stuck with them between now and next year. But then in making a choice this year, then let Nigerians decide in terms of, whom do they want to give that opportunity to move over ahead beyond 2027. That's what I'll have to say. And I think, we should look at the character issue. People whose identity we are not sure of, people whose background we are not sure of, and I think these are things that on both sides. These are issues that are very, very important. But we are faced with this choice now, that as a part of the movement towards the future, it is too late for 2027. We already have a choice now between the APC, that is the ruling party at the federal level, the PDP that is already registered, and a few other parties that are registered. And the PDP is also in power in a number of states. Labour Party is in power in some states. So, but beyond them, so it has to be a kind of calculation of what each the voter thinks. But what I think we can also do is to ensure that we compensate through our own political action to make it clear to the government that enough is, we cannot keep on standing this. And I think to detach ourselves from that, you see, Chapter 2 has been turned into an ethnic thing. It's supposed to resolve the national question. No, in terms of rotation of power. That's Chapter 2, and that is what the politicians have been using. It's our turn now. It's their turn now. And so on and so forth. No, that is not the spirit of the Constitution. So let us look out. Let each person decide this is a credible candidate, and I'm going to vote from at the national level, at the regional level. We know them, and okay. I think by and large, I think the INEC has made remarkable progress. If we still have problems about them, those are problems that are coming from the political environment itself. The fact that the politicians will not allow free and fair elections to take place across both opposition parties and government parties, they are always thinking of how do we undermine the electoral process. And that's why it's very, very important that at least to give that appearance of neutrality, Nigerians must focus on the next choice of members of the National Electoral Commission, particularly the chairman of the Electoral Commission, because we need somebody of integrity there. And in the last few years, you had men of integrity as chairman of the Electoral Commission. But don't let we have people who are openly partisan are being put there, and that is the whole reason of making sure you have control of the National Assembly. So they just be a rubber stamp, and when you send in nominations, they will approve them.
Okay, Prof.
Without debate, without looking at their credentials.
Thank you so much, Prof. Thank you. We must go. Time is fast spent. But before we go, Tunde, I must ask this question. What will it take to move from political symbolisms, as we do have them now, ruling party, opposition, and all of that, to re-electoral impact? What will it take?
Well, it's going to be a very tough trip, really. Why is it a tough trip? We have a situation whereby we have those who are already entrenched in the system, either in the political party, either in the electoral institutions, or either in control of the judiciary, in charge of all of the institutions that actually have to play critical role. And they have definite direction about power capture. And when they talk about power capture, it's strictly about in terms of a group of friends, a coalition. Forget just coalition, just a crisis amongst friends. As I said earlier on when we started, who are those in ADC who are going to ADC? Same people who move from PDP, from AMPP, from CPC to APC, who lost out in the battle amongst friends and are moving to another space. I call them space, not political parties, really, because that's what they seek for. And it's about just capturing power. And if you know in the recent times...
Special purpose vehicles.
Yes, special purpose vehicles. And if you notice in recent times, even the ADC stalwarts, it has not been about this is what is wrong with the country, these are the alternatives we are offering. It's about these individuals or this particular person must be pushed out. And you also have the response even from the ruling party. And unfortunately, those who are being paid by taxpayers' money, who are also sitting at the presidency, their responses has also been about a man cannot be pushed out. It's not about this is what we are doing that is better than what has happened before. So how do we get out of this situation? As I said, electoral is not going to be an overnight journey. It's going to be a long trip. And as I will keep insisting to tomorrow, that the INEC that I know, the INEC that I understand, has not helped Nigeria to the extent that it has not allowed for the emergence of alternate platforms, alternate political parties with alternate ideas about how we run the economy, how we organize ourselves, how we manage our resources. And when you come and you say a political party should emerge and should win elections in virtually all of the states of the Federation overnight, you are already playing out a script.
In other words, we must, as it were, amend the law.
Amend the law itself.
That regulates the electoral process.
Yes.
Or in fact, the formation of political party, formation and registration of political parties. Because at the moment, we understand over 110, in fact, 122 or so political associations have thrown in their applications.
And I will insist that for a country or population of over 200 million, it's not too much. Okay. If Britain with a population of 68 million has 393 political parties.
All right, thank you so much. Thank you, Tunde. Tunde Aremu is a civil society activist and a public intellectual joining us here on the program. We must thank Professor Adc-Led, renowned political scientist, teacher, and researcher. Thank you so much, Prof, for always honoring our invitation.
Thank you, Moni. All the best.
Thank you so much. And Professor B.N. Makodi. Professor Makodi is a professor of political science at the Nnamdi Azikiwe University in Awka in Southeast Nigeria. He's also the vice president of the Nigerian Political Science Association. Thank you so much, Professor Makodi, for joining us. All right, that's our program for today. Please join us again when we bring you a fresh edition of People, Politics, and Power. Bye for now.